This is Stay Paid, the marketing podcast that gives listeners a competitive edge to stay motivated, find inspiration, and discover proven real-world tactics from some of the best marketers across the nation.
Welcome to another episode of Stay Paid. My name is Joshua Stike.
And I'm Luke Acree.
And Mr. Luke Acree.
Yes.
You are like a superstar.
I'm a superstar now. I've done one event.
Yeah.
And all the images make it look like I'm an influencer. I love it.
It was the pyro.
Yeah.
I said, everyone needs just to walk around with pyro and your credibility is immediately increased.
We're referring to my speech at 8%. You come out with music when they introduce you, pyro going. And I was like, this is how I need to be welcomed home. Every night from Evelyn, Will, and Megan. And here he comes. He's a marketing genius.
Absolutely. Well, part of that was, we talked a couple weeks ago about how, what you learned from that experience of being on stage. But, sometimes that communication comes down to a more intimate level. Maybe it's a team meeting. You might be speaking on stage, but maybe it's a team meeting. Maybe it's a one-on-one meeting. So today we wanted to talk about kind of 6 bullet points that you put together on how to become just an incredible communicator in general. So, right, sort of being able to influence and communicate tactfully, but also like with clarity with your audience, how to connect with them.
The more and more I grow business or businesses and I deal with people, the more I realize, man, there's 2 things that are insanely important. One is EQ, emotional intelligence. So your ability to read the room, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But then the other thing is really your communication skills. Like your ability to talk to people at all different levels in all different situations is like, if you can master the art of communication, it was Warren Buffett, I believe, that said, you can increase your net worth by 50% if you master the skill of communication.
Yeah.
So here's the guy that is the oracle of Omaha in investing in the stock market, in companies. And he thinks that the greatest investment you can make is in your communication skills because it will raise your net worth by at least 50%. And Warren is actually a good communicator, but you wouldn't think that by his personality type and by what he does for a living.
Yeah, and it's not something that comes naturally to us, or not something certainly that we're taught in school. Like everything in school, it's up to you. You go home, you do your homework, you work on this, you solve this problem, you go through college, you do the same thing. And of course, there's like public speaking classes, and some people take those, and you can learn to kind of communicate there. Then you get into the workforce, and you have tasks, and you're required to do X, Y, Z. And then you get to a point where you either find yourself in a position of influence, where you're maybe in sales, or you're in a position of influence within your organization where you're trying to create change or lead people. And I think that's where people need to get hit with the harsh reality of how important it went from, okay, I can work on this problem by myself, to, I need to now communicate and influence others to work on this with me.
Yeah, we have an amazing executive in our organization that is actually one of the smarter people in our organization, but doesn't communicate the best.
He's talking about me, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Josh. I didn't want to reveal it. No, it doesn't communicate the best. You're a great communicator, and they can't get their ideas done.
Yeah.
They can't get things accomplished and across the finish line simply because they can't communicate with clarity, but more importantly, with influence that gets buy-in to get people to take action.
Yeah.
And I think, the first bullet point that I wrote down that is the most important for great communication, especially when you're one-on-one, is to be a great communicator. You have to be an amazing listener, an amazing observer. Like you have to be able, great communicators read the room. They read the situation. And one of the greatest things you can do in business, in marketing, in relationships is put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
So you have a message you want to share, but for that message to be impactful, to have influence, you have to put yourself in the other person's shoes to understand how they're going to perceive your message.
Yeah.
And most people don't do that.
I think that really hits on getting out of your own head as well, because, and this happens with a lot of, I was actually looking into it a little bit just to see if my assumption was correct. And introverted people tend to be more inward thinking. They tend to like to solve problems on their own. They tend to be more comfortable working inwardly, and then once they come to the decision, they kind of like, all right, now we're ready to go. Whereas extroverted people tend to be a little bit more outward influencing and wanting to kind of bounce ideas off of people. So this idea of staying out of your own head and being able to communicate from the perspective of the people that you're talking to and how they're actually going to receive that, versus this idea of, okay, what do I think? What do I want to get across? How will people actually receive that? And then the other point that I would put in here that's really strong in terms of, if you're trying to look for like a tangible way, like maybe you're not great at reading nonverbal clues or reading the room itself. That's something you can work on, but you want to ask for feedback and you want to ask for direct
That's
feedback.
a great point.
So if you're if you're speaking to a group or you're trying to kick off a project or you're trying to work directly with a prospect, you want to ask their feedback and you want to ask like open-ended questions. And a great open-ended question that is really great on like interviews and things like that is, so what questions do you have for me?
Yes.
Like if this assumes that you're not speaking to a large room of people, you're speaking to a smaller group or one-on-one, so what questions do you have for me will then force them to almost repeat back to you or sort of reveal how they perceived your message in the first place, which will help you moving forward with clarifying your message. Yeah.
Silence is okay. And that is like, I'm preaching to myself here because I'm terrible at this.
Not on a podcast, though. Silence is not very effective on a podcast.
But in a combo, right? Even in an interview, right? When you listen to people get interviewed, whether it's, politicians or, presidents or whatever, great leaders, when they're asked a question, the ones who stop, think, and then answer, their answer is so much more impactful just because of the silence.
Yeah.
Just because of you can see that they thought about their answer. Where not as experienced communicators like myself for many, many years, and even today, is you respond so fast.
Yeah.
And because you think it's about energy, and there's a part of it that's about energy, but it's also about making sure people understand that you're really taking seriously what you're asking.
That's a great point. Yeah. I
to
love
make
that.
them feel that way.
Second bullet point you wrote down here was this idea of the law of connecting.
Yeah. So this is John Maxwell. John Maxwell obviously is the godfather of communication. He wrote the book on it. So much of what I've learned and practice comes from him and from others in the space. But this law of connecting is most of the time we're communicating for what we want, and we're not allowing vulnerability and transparency in our conversations.
Yeah.
And I think it's really powerful for people to understand who you are and what you're feeling. So a lot of people might coach you, never tell people that you're nervous when you're on stage. I totally disagree. And John Maxwell disagrees. If you're nervous, you can share with people that you're nervous.
Yeah.
If this is your first speech, you can share with people it's your first speech. The audience, now you have to deliver, but the audience will actually appreciate you more, connect with you more. And I wrote down what John Maxwell said. He said this: success is a terrible separator and keeps us from people. People may be impressed with your strengths, but they connect with you through your weakness. And if you think about that, it is so true. It's like you're impressed by people who are successful, but you don't really connect from the standpoint of like, oh, this person really gets me. The ones who are great communicators, the Eric Thomases of the world, the Ed Miletts, how do they connect with you? They share their history. If you're Eric Thomas, I was on the street, homeless, eating out of a dumpster. Ed Milet, I was driving a fake Mercedes. Like I was just like you. I was putting on this persona that I thought I was successful. They literally reveal their weaknesses to connect, so then they can move the emotion of somebody, because emotion is what causes people to take action.
Yeah, some of the bullet points underneath this idea of the law of connection I pulled here real quick because I think it hits on what you're saying, which is the idea of connecting with yourself, understanding who you really are and your history, communicate with openness, which is what you're hitting on, knowing your audience, so knowing who you're actually speaking to, living your message. So if you're saying one
that's
thing
a great one.
and doing something else, people won't take that seriously. Meet them where they are is another idea of connecting with that weaknesses, focusing on them, and then most importantly, believing in them. So not just trying to, be up there because you want to be the big shot, but actually believing that the people that you're speaking to can do what you're saying. And then at the end here, offering direction. And
John
hope.
Maxwell, Ed Milet, Tony Robbins, Eric Thomas, right? All that I would consider top of the top when it comes to public speaking, communication skills. When they're asked before they go on stage, what are you thinking about?
Yeah.
Most people are thinking about what? Their topic, their bullet points, their notes, what they're going to say. I'm just thinking about the people in the audience.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about how can I serve them? How can I give back to them? And I focused on that for 8%. Like when I was backstage, of course I'm nervous, all these things, but I just kept thinking to myself that thought of there are, 1,000 people in this room, 1,000 individuals. How can I serve them and give to them the knowledge that I know, that I've lived, that will maybe advance their life? And it's just about giving. I don't need them to like me. I don't need them to laugh at my jokes. I don't need them to smile at me. I just want to give to them all that I have.
Yeah.
So hopefully it will resonate. And it did. But that helped me a ton before my speech.
Ties perfectly into the next one, this idea of speaking with conviction and speaking on what you truly believe in.
Yeah. So this you can tell, man, when you get around people who believe what they say and do what they say, honestly, is you want to speak with conviction, and you need to think about it. It's like, what would you die for right now? What do you believe in so much that you would give? And maybe death is too far extreme, but that's a good way to, put it out there. But what would you sacrifice for? Yeah. What would you give up your time, your energy, your money? That's a conviction.
And not to be funny, like not to almost oversimplify it. You said, what would you give up your time for? That's literally what would you die for?
Yes.
Because you're not getting that time back.
Man, so good. Yeah. Literally, like, you should be doing things and speaking on things that you actually have conviction around, because that conviction is going to be portrayed. If you think about like what really moves people in sales is confidence. People want to buy from people that they believe in what they're saying.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest things you can get in sales is to understand it's not about making that other person believe. It's about making that other person believe that you believe what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because people want to follow people that believe in what they're saying, believe in the cause, believe in the mission, believe in the results, whatever it is that you're selling, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And you've got to display that. And a lot of times this comes from, and this goes really into the next law, which is this idea of preparation, right? The next point here. But it's like, how do you display confidence and conviction? Confidence comes from competence. You can't get competence without preparation.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, if you want to speak with conviction on a subject matter, you have to have competence on that subject matter, which means you have to have put in the work.
Yep.
Like, where did I get my skills of communication from? We've done how many episodes of this podcast now?
485.
485. Go watch our first episodes. I mean, rough.
They were great.
But before that, man, I was in a band.
Welcome to Stay Paid.
Yeah. Welcome to Stay Paid, the sales and marketing podcast to change your life. I was in a band from 13 to like 19. I was the front man of the band.
Were you always involved in like church also in front of people?
Always involved in church in front of people.
You had it from even an earlier
from
age.
Like 11, 12, 13 years old. I am speaking to crowds.
Yeah.
I am trying to influence people going, hey, clap your hands. And when they don't clap, you still look them down and stare into their soul with a big smile and say, no, clap your hands, get up and dance. Those things, like it teaches you the art of communication and influence and holding to your conviction. Like I used to tell my band before we would get on stage, I look at them and I go, no matter what, you smile and you're having the best time of your life, because that smile and what you are personifying there will go across to the audience way more than the words we're saying.
Yeah.
And if we hold true to that conviction and we get out there and we actually do that and we say, clap, dance, this is the best day of your life. People never failed. Always after our shows come up, man, I just loved watching you guys. You guys were just having a blast. And it could have been horrible. We in our brains were thinking the sound sucks. This is terrible. It's hot. Like, oh man, we're messing up, all this stuff. But you're personifying that conviction to people, and you only get that through preparation, through actually preparing, through actually going, this is who we're going to be. If you choose who you're going to be in the moment, you will die.
Yeah.
If you choose who you're going to be before the moment, then you have a chance to hold. So if whoever you are, whatever your conviction is, whatever you're trying to accomplish, you can't decide in the moment. You have to decide before you get there. You can rarely ever teach to someone something you haven't taught to yourself. You can't deliver what you haven't developed, is the saying. You have to develop the skill set that you want to communicate to somebody so you can deliver it with conviction. And that comes to preparation.
You brought this point up a couple episodes ago, but we've talked about it before, this idea of preparing for your pitch or recording, most specifically. Like if you're in real estate right now, record your listing presentation.
Yes.
Right? Put your phone, no matter how, I don't care how uncomfortable it is, you're the only one that's going to see it, so it doesn't really matter. If it's that uncomfortable and bad watching it back, that means you have a lot of work to do. Record yourself doing your listing presentation and do it 20 times, do it 30 times, do it 50 times until you are that confident and you feel that good about your presentation that you can go out and do that without even having to think about it. And then you can actually focus on the people you're speaking to and your beliefs versus what you're saying.
Yeah, I recorded my 8% speech on my computer. It had to be 15, 20 times.
Yeah. Which is impressive because you could naturally go up and wing it.
Yeah, I probably could.
You actually could
wing it.
So just the ability to do that anyway, the discipline to do
But
that
are you going to wing it or are you going to work at it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're going to wing
So
it. Professionals don't wing it.
Yeah.
They work at it.
Yeah. Love it. Number 5, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yes.
All right. I wasn't
correct.
sure if there was a different variation of this that you had.
Well, if your name begins with an S, add your name. But keep it simple.
Keep it simple, Stike.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, great communicators take complex concepts and break them down to simple things to
I struggle with
understand.
this one the absolute most. Like this is the one that I struggle with the most. And so what I've done is to, and rather intentionally, is I will try and explain some of these things to my kids. Or I'll pretend like I'm explaining to my kids, or I'll actually walk them through it and see if they understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I love that.
Because they talk about what you have, I don't know if you have it, to communicate your message on an 8th grade level.
Yeah.
And so like if you have kids or think about how you would explain things to your children, it's pretty much the same way.
And it's
because you kind of have to start at the beginning, assume they know nothing, and build your foundation.
And you
from
have
there.
to work at that.
Yeah.
Like that's a skill set. Now, I'm not a writer. You're more the writer and the content guy and work with writers all the time. But I bet you it's a lot easier to crank out 2 pages of something than it is to get your whole message within just one paragraph.
Oh,
you actually have to think about what you are saying with every word. But I would much rather read a paragraph and get the information than I would 2 pages to get the same information.
Yeah, there's a famous quote. I can't remember what it was, but it's like, if you want me to give an hour speech, I can do it now. If you want me to give a 10-minute speech, it'll take me a week.
There you go. That's the perfect way to say it. And so you want to be able to communicate on a level that anybody can understand, and you want to not be as verbose. Mm-hmm. And I struggle with this. Like, this is my hardest thing. It's like, deliver it in as few as words as possible, right? Give people back the gift of time.
Yeah. Number 6, maybe the most important one, especially in sales, but definitely when trying to explain your idea, is great communicators use stories.
Yes.
So they're not just out there rattling off a list of facts or rattling off a list of to-dos or here's strategies. It's like, no, they connect through the power of storytelling.
So when you record your listing presentation, your financial presentation, your insurance pitch, do you have any stories in there? Like, listen back to it. Do you have any stories to explain these concepts that you're doing? Because it will stick with people. Stats don't stick with people. Stories stick with people. But every speech that I've watched that I've given, I realize, wow, it's really these stories that even resonate with me. And I've heard this before.
Yeah.
But it's like the stats don't resonate, and so many people want to share stats.
There's, and if you're thinking about it through the lens of, let's just stick on the topic of your listening presentation, think back through the people that you've worked with and the experiences that you had and certain, interesting, everyone has crazy stories, right? Mm-hmm. So think about that and how you can weave that in. Or if you want to use, like, if you want an example of someone who is fantastic at weaving in other business stories, like look at a Simon Sinek, look at his speech on the, sorry, help me out.
Start with the why.
Start with the why. Yeah. He does a fantastic job of walking through like Apple's story. You had the same experience at 8% where you had this story of Red Bull, and you don't want your stories to come across forced or fake or inauthentic. So you had the story of Red Bull, and you knew you wanted to deliver this story. You knew you wanted to open with this story, but your thought process was like, how do I make it
as authentic,
feel real and
as
almost
possible.
impromptu?
Yes.
And so that actually ended up like you weren't able to use it because you messed up on stage.
I got lucky, and I still kind of did. My whole thought process was energy, right? This crowd was very energetic. 8% is all about energy, this community that they've created. And so I was like, man, I'm going to thank people for their energy because I love their energy. It connects with me. But I'm going to go, speaking of energy, did you guys hear the story about Red Bull?
Yeah.
And how literally they're on the verge of bankruptcy, and they turned their whole company around by a crazy marketing strategy by throwing their Red Bull cans in the trash. Like, that was going to be my opening type hook. Mm-hmm. And people would then lean in and go, what are you talking about? Type idea. But I was so nervous to be able to deliver it authentically. And I come out of the backstage, walk, when the pyro's going off the music, and I almost trip and fall on my face because there was a step I didn't see. Mm-hmm. And Cody, the host of the whole conference, saw that, and he's laughing as I'm coming down the catwalk, other people in the audience. And I ended up using that as my opening, going, man, did you guys see I almost fell on my face? I said, that video would have gone viral, and people are laughing. I said, but that's the thing about business and marketing. You got to be willing to fall on your face sometimes to go viral and to make it. Mm-hmm. And then I go, man, and everybody's, and I say, but I love you guys' energy. speaking of energy, did you guys hear the story about Red Bull and how they almost went bankrupt?
Yeah.
Right. And then people leaned in, and then from the very beginning, you have them hooked.
Yeah.
But because it's a story. And why are we making this point? Because I could come out and say the whole thing behind the Red Bull story was Red Bull put their cans in the trash cans all around London.
Yeah.
And they literally created an illusion of popularity where people started seeing all these empty Red Bull cans, and people started to go, wow, Red Bull's really popular. Even though they're on the verge of bankruptcy, not making it, these people are this is a really popular drink. So it convinced the consumer to go try Red Bull. Mm-hmm. And that one marketing strategy turned everything around for them. So what was I trying to teach? I was trying to teach, hey, it's about frequency of getting your brand out there. So I could have come out and said, guys, it's about frequency of getting your brand out there. But that wouldn't have hooked anybody.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have brought anybody in. But the story of Red Bull to get that point across actually hooks people in. And now they're listening. And now I can talk about frequency of marketing.
Love it. There you go. There are 6 ideas for how to become an incredible communicator. Thank you so much for listening. You can head over to staypaidpodcast.com for the show notes of this episode. And if you like this episode and want to show your support, head on over to Apple Podcasts, drop us a 5-star review along with a comment. We'll read it here on the show. And the best way to show your support is just to share Stay Paid with somebody that you know. We really appreciate it. What do you call a reluctant potato? A hesitator. A hesitator.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that one. If you want to get a hold of me, Luke, you can email us at podcast@remindermedia.com, or you can find us on Instagram. We are at Stay Paid Podcast. For this episode of Stay Paid, I'm Joshua Stike.
Guys, I'm Luke Acree. Your action item from this is simple. Record your sales presentation. Record it, watch it back, ask yourself, do you have stories? Are you actually keeping it simple? Are you applying these principles that allow you to connect with the audience? Remember, the difference between top producers and mediocre producers in every business is top producers take action. Take action on that today.